Good evening and welcome to the inauguration of Governor-elect Janet Mills. I'm Jennifer Rooks here with colleagues Steve Missler and Robbie Feinberg. For the next 2 hours, we will be live from the Augusta Civic Center, where there will be ceremony, performance, and ultimately the swearing in of Governor-elect Janet Mills. A lot to talk about, a lot to see in the next couple hours, but we understand we're starting with a little bit of entertainment. The Sauk Alexis Family Singers starting us off tonight. They're on the stage. And some entertainment with the Sauk Alexis Family Singers to kick off 2 hours of ceremony here at the inauguration of Governor-elect Janet Mills. Robbie Feinberg, what do we expect next?
Yeah, coming up next, we are awaiting the members of the Maine House as they enter the auditorium. They're led by House Speaker Rachel Talbot Ross. She's the first black person ever to hold that position in Maine. In fact, the legislature, it's the most diverse in history. 5 people of color serving in the 131st, including 2 Somali Americans. And it sounds like they're coming out right now.
That's right. We can see them coming into the room here. We are, of course, in the Augusta Civic Center, the biggest venue in the Augusta area. Steve, this is essentially a joint session of the Maine legislature, right?
Correct. The Maine Constitution requires that people elected or appointed to certain positions in state government take an oath of office, and in many instances that oath is administered by the governor. But when the governor is sworn in for their first or second term, they take their oaths before the House and Senate. before a joint session of the legislature, and tonight that oath will be administered by Democratic Senate President Troy Jackson of Allagash. All of this is prescribed in the Maine Constitution, even the day of the inauguration itself. That is why we are here today on January 4th, 2023, because it is the first Wednesday after the first Tuesday in January, just as the Constitution requires.
Yeah, and Steve, speaking of these lawmakers, we have already had news today that the governor, she just signed that emergency heating relief bill.
That's right. The bill you mentioned was actually introduced on swearing-in day for legislators back in early December. It was the first time in nearly 3 decades that such a bill had been proposed and votes were taken on swearing-in day. The outcome did not go the governor's way on that particular day because Senate Republicans blocked the measure, but 2 crossed the aisle today, and that bill passed. The governor signed it almost immediately within hours of it leaving the legislature. And I won't get into too many details, but that political battle and everything surrounding it really was, I think, illustrative of the battles that came in the election and maybe foreshadowing what we'll see in the upcoming session as well.
And again, we're watching lawmakers walking into the Augusta Civic Center, taking their seats. Steve, as we look here, is this the members of the Maine House of Representatives before us right now on the screen?
Correct, and it'll take a while because that's the largest body, 151 members. The Senate is 35 members, so it'll take a little while to seat these folks.
And then where we see Speaker of the House Rachel Talbot Ross at the podium, it looks as though she's waiting for her members to gather and all take their places before speaking. Rachel Talbot Ross, of course, making history, as Robbie noted, as the first black Speaker of the House of House of Representatives in Maine. She'll be joined later on the stage by Senate President Troy Jackson. Steve, there's a lot to take on right away in this legislature, isn't there?
Yeah, there really is. I mean, in some instances, the major issues that are affecting this legislature are effectively crises. In fact, I can't think of a time in the past decade that multiple big problems were so dominant so early in a legislative session. I mean, the heating bill you mentioned a few moments ago was a response to one of those crises, and that's the concern that some Maine residents won't be able to heat their homes amid soaring energy costs. And that's why the governor introduced that emergency bill last month and then asked lawmakers to pass it immediately. Took some time, but they finally got there today. There's also major problems in the judicial branch. There are staff shortages and case backlogs stemming from the pandemic. There's also a huge problem that involves the state's constitutionally required responsibility to provide legal counsel for low-income defendants. That will need to be resolved as well, and there are a couple bills already in that attempt to do that. And and meanwhile, the governor has to propose
the House
a
will
two-year
be in
budget.
Order. The chair is pleased to recognize the Honorable Troy D. Jackson, President of the Maine Senate, and the honorable members of the Maine Senate.
Rachel Talbot Ross, as you just heard, introducing the members of the Maine Senate, a smaller body. Won't take as long to seat this group. Again, this is ceremony, a procession. We see this every 4 years. We see it every year, really, at the State of the State address, Steve. Not usually televised.
That's right.
And never at the Civic Center, usually in the State House.
That's correct. Yep. But anyway, as I was saying, Jen, just the 2-year budget will be a major obstacle for not just the governor, but for everybody involved, and that's coming up pretty shortly, within a month.
At the podium, Senate President Troy Jackson, just as Speaker of the House Rachel Talbot Ross did before, waiting for the members of the Senate to be situated before calling his body to order. Is that the right way to say it, Steve? Calling them to order?
I hope so. No, it is. That's correct.
Convention will come to order. Chair recognizes the senator from Cumberland, Senator Carney.
Mr. Chairman, I present a convention order and move its passage.
Senator from Cumberland, Senator Carney, presents a convention order, moves its passage. Secretary, read the order.
Ordered that a committee be appointed to wait upon the Honorable Associate Justices of the Supreme Judicial Court, the Chief Justice and Justices of the Maine Superior Court, the Chief Judge and Judges of the District Court, the Chief Judge of the District Court, and the federal judges, inviting them to attend the convention which was convened for the purpose of administering to the Honorable Janet Trafton Mills, Governor-elect, the oaths required by the Constitution to qualify her to enter upon the discharge of her official duties.
It is the pleasure of the convention that this order receive passage. It's a vote. The chair will appoint the following: the Senator from Cumberland, Senator Kearney; the Senator from York, Senator Bailey; Senator Penobscot, Senator Lyford; the representative from Portland, Representative Moonen; the representative from South Portland, Representative Galgay-Reckitt; the representative from Cumberland, Representative Moriarty; the representative from Biddeford, Representative Sheehan; the representative from Auburn, Representative Lee; the representative from Falmouth, Representative Kuhn; the representative from Skowhegan, Representative Poirier; the representative from Paris, Representative Andrews; the representative from Handon, Representative Hagan.
Getting a sense of some of the ceremony that goes on. There's going to be a lot of, Steve, back and forth, a lot of reading of names, people being sent to fetch other people and escort them into the building.
That's correct.
Nothing that's really, should we say, going to be a surprise,
No.
going to be news. This is the ceremony that happens every 4 years. You see a group of legislators off now to find others to bring into the room. Robbie Feinberg, we're here at the inauguration of who we call Governor-elect Janet Mills, even though she has been governor for 4 years. That for today, for right now, is the preferred term until the swearing in. This is a very different situation than 4 years ago. If you think about the last time this group of people was sitting in this room for this reason, there had been no pandemic.
Yeah, it is astonishingly different. I mean, you think about virtually every part of government, and Steve, you have clearly seen this as well. I mean, I think of education, I think of healthcare, I think of labor and the economy. Everything has been changed. It's funny because I think things don't look all that different necessarily than they did 4 years ago, but clearly the state of Maine, we have felt that difference over these past 4 years.
That's right. Yeah, there was a massive disruption for about 2.5 years in state government. In fact, this facility, the Augusta Civic Center, served as the legislature for a time in 2021 because they were trying to do social distancing and that sort of thing. And so they actually convened here less frequently than they often do in the State House during a normal session because they didn't want to bring everybody here all the time. But they did do a number of session days here until vaccines became widely available and they felt like we could meet in person again.
Steve, what does the legislature look like compared to the legislature 4 years ago when Governor Mills was first sworn in?
Well, it's not that much different, to be honest. Right now, of the 35 members in the Senate, 22 are Democrats, 13 are Republicans. In the House, it is, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but the Democrats still have a majority. And there were no gains from the election for Republicans. They had some high hopes of gaining some ground in the legislature, but they did not do that. Democrats have what is often referred to as a trifecta. They control the House, they control the Senate, and they control the governor's office. And they will continue to do that at least through the end of 2024 because the legislature serves 2 terms. The governor obviously is there for another 4 years. So,
yeah, Steve, we've only seen one real vote, the bill that passed today, but did that signify anything to you about how folks may vote or what things might look like in the legislature?
It may. I mean, I think that's a big question, and I think a lot of that will depend on Republican legislators and what they want to do. I mean, they're kind of in a difficult spot right now after the election. Like I said, they had high hopes of gaining majorities or at least gaining one chamber. They had hoped to take the governor's office. None of that happened. And so, they're trying to find their way right now. And even on that first heating bill vote back in December, House Republicans, the majority, or most of them, went along with that and passing it, went along.
Chair recognizes Senator from Cumberland, Senator Kearney.
Mr. Chairman, we have delivered the message with which we were charged and are pleased to report that the honorable members of the judiciary will attend forthwith.
Chair hears the message and thanks the messenger.
expecting the members of the Maine Supreme Judicial Court to be escorted into the room right now. Different Chief Justice than 4 years ago. That was Lee Softly back then. And now Valerie Stanfield. Lee Softly now head of the University of Maine Law School. And boy, another place that we're facing a crisis, the Maine's court system.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. There's a backlog of cases in the system, as I mentioned earlier. The indigent legal defense, which is a defense, a constitutionally required defense that for low-income people who are criminally charged, that system is in deep crisis. The lawyers, the defense attorneys are not showing up. Maine is the only state in the country that relies exclusively on private attorneys to provide that service, and right now they're not doing it. They're not signing up for that. There's some concern that maybe the state is not compensating those attorneys enough. There's a push to increase their budget, and that may or may not happen. I'm not sure, but I think there are some people who believe there's a structural problem with the indigent legal defense system, and that any kind of problem, that any kind of solution must look at a structural change as opposed to just throwing money and paying the attorneys more an hourly rate that's higher than it is right now.
And I want to amend what I said earlier. I said members of the Maine Supreme Judicial Court. Yes, of course, those were in the lead, but it appears that Maine's entire judiciary has been escorted in right now. And Steve, it's not just the indigent legal defense. Chief Justice Valerie Stanfield was on Maine Calling earlier this month, said the entire court system running behind, exacerbated by the pandemic, already underwater. Many, it differs by county, but generally 60% behind.
That's right. I mean, I think just through the criminal justice system and judicial system, there are a lot of problems to be addressed. I mean, we know that in Cumberland County, for example, they're not able to house people who have been convicted in some cases or are awaiting trial. And so those people are being turned away, and that's a problem.
Chair would like to recognize in the convention Chief Rena Newell of the Passamaquoddy Tribal Nation in Pleasant Point, Chief Nichols of the Passamaquoddy Tribal Nation in Princeton, and Chief Clarissa Sabatis of the Holton Band in Maliseets. I'd also like to recognize Senate Presidents and former speakers, Senate President Libby Mitchell, Speaker John Martin, Speaker Mike Saxel, Speaker Hannah Pingree, Speaker Glenn Cummins, and Speaker Ryan Fecto. Would the convention please give applause to the dignitaries? Chair is pleased to welcome to the joint convention members of the clergy, Rabbi Erica Ash of Temple Beth El in Augusta, and Right Reverend Thomas James Brown, Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine.
Jen, I just wanted to say real quick, I didn't have the numbers at the ready on the House, but it's 82 Democrats, 67 Republicans, and 2 independents.
All right, and presiding right now, Senate President Troy Jackson. Steve, an interesting story there. Though he was Senate President in the last legislative session, his race, was it closer than it had been in years past?
And more expensive. $1 million was spent on that race. That's including candidate spending as well as outside groups, which can spend unlimited amount of money. He prevailed in that contest, and he might be one of the few Democrats who can. And so, but that was just one example, I think, of just how prolific the spending has become in legislative races writ large, not just in Maine, but across the country. A lot of big issues are being forced down into state legislatures. Maine is not different from that trend. In fact, you could argue that they've been leading it in a lot of ways, but Democrats have actually invested a lot of money in making sure that they can hold the majorities here, and they've done that. At least in the last few years.
Members of the cabinet being let in. Robbie Feinberg, one of those, is Education Secretary Pender Macon, and talking about she came into this job 4 years ago hoping to do something about high stakes testing, thinking about educating all students equally, and instead she was faced with everything being turned upside down by the pandemic.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Those school closures that we never really seen anything quite like that before, and that has changed everything within schools. I mean, the big focus right now that you hear coming from her department and coming from lots of schools is the test scores being low and needing to work on that. So that's really been the effort.
In the front there, Secretary of State Shenna Bellows. Behind her, Attorney General Aaron Fry. Steve, take over. I see Matt Dunlap, State Auditor.
Oh, Henry Beck is the State Treasurer.
State Treasurer Henry Beck.
That's right. Sorry,
coming into the room right now. I'm sorry, we don't have as clear a view as we.
Right, and one unique tidbit about the constitutional officers, the Attorney General, State Treasurer, and Secretary of State, is that the legislature elects those positions. That's unique in the United States. Most states, those are popularly elected positions or appointed by a governor. So.
Well, Steve, I think about just the appointment, then the reappointment of Auditor Matt Dunlap as well. It kind of speaks to that as well, and just kind of the odd ways that things can work here.
That's right, and because of course Matt Dunlap was the Secretary of State for so many years, people know him via that role, and there was a change because he was termed out of that role 2 years ago, and now he's back as a state auditor.
The Joint Convention, family members of the governor-elect.
Well, there you have it. The Mills family, a prominent family in Maine. Dora Mills, former DHHS commissioner and now an executive Maine Health behind her. Her brother, Peter Mills, longtime state senator. Steve, take over from there.
Well, what's interesting, I think, about the Mills family is that they often act as a bit of a kitchen cabinet for the governor. She consults with them on a lot of big issues. She gets their advice and talks to them quite frequently. And I'm not sure how much their input is involved in decision making necessarily. I think the governor is pretty independent that way, but she does speak, take their counsel.
And in the family, both Republicans and Democrats.
That's right. Yep, that's right. She happens to be a Democrat, but Peter, for example, was a Republican. Peter Mills. He's now with the Maine Turnpike Authority.
That's right, but longtime state senator. And a former candidate for governor of Maine.
Yep, that's right. In fact, he in 2010 he ran and was among many Republicans who were defeated by the party's nominee that year, which was Paul LePage. Went on to win the governorship that year, and he ran this past year as well and lost.
So again, if you're just joining us, we are at the Augusta Civic Center.
Mr. Chairman, I present a convention order and move its passage.
The Senator of Manasquagan, Senator Rotundo, presents his convention order, moves its passage. The Secretary will read the order.
And what we are seeing is a lot of the ceremony that goes along with this event, which is the inaugural of Governor-elect Janet Mills.
Ready to administer to her the oaths
Members of the
required by
legislature being
Constitution
appointed
qualify
to
her enter upon the discharge
escort
of her official duties and receive such communication that
parties
she may be
into the room. I believe that there's...
Pleasure to convention. This order received passage. It's a vote. The chair will appoint the following: the Senator from Androscoggin, Senator Rotundo; the Senator from Oxford, Senator Bennett; the Senator from Cumberland, Senator Daughtry; the Senator from Saginaw, Senator Vitelli; the Senator from Aroostook, Senator Stewart; the Senator from Oxford, Senator Kine; the representative from Freeport, Representative Sachs; the representative from Waterford, Representative Millett; the representative from Gorham, Representative Terry; and the representative from Winter Harbor, Representative Falkingham; the representative from New Gloucester, Representative Arada. Chair would ask that the committee formed to discharge its duties. The Sergeant at Arms will escort the committee.
All right, again, a delegation being sent this time to go find the governor and escort the governor in. This will be a few minutes, though. We are at the Augusta Civic Center live here on Maine Public Television, and we are watching the ceremony that precedes the inauguration of a governor, Governor Janet Mills, 71st governor of the state of Maine, but the 71st governor, but the 75th gubernatorial term, because 4 governors served 2 non-consecutive terms. Robbie, people here are here by invitation, free, open to the public, but you had to say that you wanted to come.
Yeah, there was a little bit of you just had to sign right up, but yeah, a little bit of security here. It looks like it's pretty filled out though. There's quite a lot of folks here in the audience right now. And one of the people who we didn't get to earlier, but I thought it might be worth talking about as well, is on that Supreme Judicial Court as well. There is Rick Lawrence. He's one of the most recently appointed members, nominated and confirmed by Governor Mills. Another historic move there. He's the first black justice on the Maine Supreme Judicial Court. So as we talk about this, again, it's an historic night for that reason as well. We are seeing, first Maine black House Speaker, and also the first Maine Supreme Court justice who is black as well.
That's right. A lot of firsts in this legislature, and a lot of firsts when the governor was inaugurated 4 years ago. She was the first woman elected governor in the state of Maine, so that was a historic event. And this is these folks are not being honored tonight. Their presence here is obviously part of a lot of history that's been made in the last 4 years.
It's funny you say that, Steve. Do you remember her line 4 years ago where she said something to the effect of first ever from
Farmington,
Franklin County,
Franklin County.
And so it felt like it was going to be a line about her being the first woman, but it was she turned that laughter from everybody. The inauguration is in a period right now of pomp and circumstance. Pretty soon, though, that's going to change. There's going to be entertainment on stage. We expect Dave Mallet. We expect Maine's Poet Laureate, Julie Bousma. We expect...
the Basintu Girls Choir as well, who will also be coming. And then Richard Blanco, another poet, now from Maine as well.
That's right.
Steve Missler is with us, of course. He's the State House Chief Correspondent and covers the people we're looking at right now every single day. Steve, talk about Governor Mills' ability to, in this second term, to accomplish what she wants to.
Right. I mean, so Democrats have held a trifecta in state government since 2019, and they're guaranteed to have that another one at least through the end of 2024. Now, one might think that the legislative Democrats are going to get everything that they want and that Governor Mills will get the same, but that's really not how it works. There are divisions among Democrats on key issues, and those divisions have been acute between the governor and legislators and legislative leaders in particular. Tribal sovereignty. Democrats in the legislature have supported it. Governor Mills has opposed it. Some progressive legislators want to see sweeping criminal justice reforms. Well, Governor Mills is a former prosecutor, and as such, has opposed some of those changes in the past.
Senator from Senator Rotundo.
Mr. Chairman, we have delivered the message with which we were charged and are pleased to report that the governor-elect will attend forthwith.
Chair hears the message and thanks the messenger.
Again, some of the ceremony we were talking about, we expect Governor Mills to enter soon. Steve, finish your thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think on taxation, for example, there are Democrats who want to raise taxes on high earners. Oh.
Governor Mills, of course, wearing white, the color of, we just saw a peek of her back there, but she disappeared. But we did see she's wearing white, the color of the suffragettes, and bean boots.
Bean boots. It's a thing. It's a thing, yeah.
For For those of you just joining us on Maine Public Radio, this is Jennifer Rooks with Steve Missler and Robbie Feinberg. We are joining you live from the Augusta Civic Center, where Governor Janet Mills' inauguration is underway. Governor-elect Mills, which is formally her title for the next few minutes, is right now entering the Augusta Civic Center wearing a white blazer, white slacks, and bean boots. And you hear the applause behind us. This is the governor entering the room for her second inauguration. Steve, you said this is her thing, bean boots.
It is. I noticed a lot of elected officials in particular have donned the bean boots with suits, and as the governor-elect is showing us right now, the same thing. So I've noticed that has been a trend over the last few years.
Yeah. And Steve, do you have any sense of what the governor-elect is planning to talk about in her speech later on tonight?
Well, generally, Robbie, I mean, the inauguration speeches that I've covered have been marked more by broad aspirational themes and less by policy details that might be required to get there. And I don't expect tonight will be that much different from Governor Mills. I mean, 4 years ago, the governor used a lot of rhetorical flourishes and even some poetry to essentially outline her goals for her first term. She briefly referenced that she was the first woman elected governor of Maine, but didn't dwell on it. And she talked about building Maine's workforce, funding public education, the opioid crisis, and so forth. And I think those issues are still issues. So we'll hear about that tonight, too, I think.
For the presentation and posting of colors by the Maine National Guard, followed by Staff Sergeant Crystal Rydell, who will sing the national anthem.
For those of you joining us by radio, we are seeing right now the color guard enter the Augusta Civic Center. And we expect very soon to hear the national anthem. But again, the color guard entering the Augusta Civic Center live.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
The national anthem behind her, an honor guard of the Maine National Guard, the color guard representing the branches of the Maine National Guard. Senate President Troy Jackson presiding over this, the inauguration of Governor Janet Mills, Governor-elect Janet Mills.
That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as you are able for the invocation being offered by Rabbi Erica Ash of Temple Beth El in Augusta.
Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shavet achim gam yachad. How good and how pleasant it is for us to be gathered together this evening. When we were last in this space 4 years ago, none of us could have imagined the challenges we would face individually and collectively. Over the last 4 years, we have been reminded that our actions impact the lives of others. We are all in the same boat. But in the midst of the challenges we faced, we saw Mainers, including our governor, rise to the occasion with courage, determination, and resilience. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. How good and how pleasant it is, how miraculous for us to be together this evening here. Let us not take that gift for granted. During dark days and dark times, hope sustains us. Rabbi Stephanie Colin teaches that hope is a participatory virtue. Hope requires us to work actively to make the world better, rather than sit back and wait for the change to happen. I pray in the Jewish tradition, Eloheinu v'Elohei imotenu v'avotenu, our God and God of our ancestors. May we work to create the Maine we wish to see. We ask your blessings upon our governor. May the one who blessed Shifra and Pua with the fortitude to keep working for what was right, even in bleak times, bless her with the resilience and perseverance as she leads us into the future. May the one who blessed Leah with gratitude bless her with the ability to see not only what is left to do, but the amazing work that has already been accomplished. May the one who blessed Deborah, the prophetess, with insight and wisdom, bless her with the ability to listen carefully, decide wisely, and speak truthfully. And may the one who blessed Hannah with hope for the future bless her with a sense of hope and a spirit of joy in the years to come. We close with the words of the priestly blessing taken from the book of Numbers. May God make you like our ancient foremothers, as you have blessed us and our state through your work. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and protect you in the years to come. As you have honored us with your insightful leadership, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. May God deal compassionately and graciously with you. And as you have granted us peace of mind through your work over these last 4 years, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God show you kindness and give you the greatest of all gifts, that of shalom, of peace and wholeness. Amen.
And that invocation from Rabbi Erica Ash of Temple Beth El from right here in Augusta.
Please remain standing for the pipe and drum, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Governor-elect Janet Mills
Please
leading her
remain
grandkids
standing
on
for the Pledge of
stage.
Allegiance, which will be led by members of Governor Mills's family. her daughter Liesl, and her granddaughters Noelle and Brooke.
Ready? Hands in your hands. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I love the tiara. It's a big event, and why not wear your tiara? Senate President Troy Jackson back at the podium now. For those of you listening on radio, we believe that the actual swearing in is next. Again, we are live from the Augusta Civic Center at the inauguration of Governor-elect Janet Mills. We just heard the Pledge of Allegiance led by her grandchildren. We expect a poem by Poet Laureate Julia Bausma soon. And also more performances.
We've got the Pacintu National Girls Choir coming up. We've also got Dave Mallett, decades, really folk classics. He'll also be coming up as well. And then another poet, Richard Blanco, we'll also be hearing from.
Appropriate to have poetry at Governor Mills' inauguration, as she herself writes poetry.
Right, and Julia Bausma also teaches at the University of Maine at Farmington, Mills' hometown.
Senate President Troy Jackson in a morning coat, dressed in tails.
It's my pleasure to introduce Julia Bausma, Poet Laureate, to read an original work created for the inauguration to the Joint Convention.
Governor, this is a poem for Maine, for our land, for our people, and for our strength. This home we carry. What if home begins as simply as a bucket, with light flaming the trees toward morning, and a familiar rocking weight? Home swinging at our side as we go about the chores. Home knocks our leg into the rhythm of our footsteps, lulling, bruising us to a terrain we have already memorized, cartography we now know without knowing, like the curve of a lover's temple, how it fits flush to our palm, each rut in the woods trail, each concrete crack in the sidewalk, every expanse of field or lake below snow, granite screeing the mountain crests, granite spurring the coastline to chains of cliff and island, our strength indistinguishable from our beauty rooted to our hardness, rooted to this glacial till and soil beneath our feet. Chop wood, they tell us, when times are hard, carry water, and so we do. And some days it seems we do nothing but carry, have been carrying such a long time, and the bucket in our hands is plastic, probably, reddened knuckles around a cracked grip, or the bucket is galvanized steel, or the bucket is spun aluminum, but before that, it was wood, and before that, it was animal hide, or it was birch bark, or it was not a bucket at all, but a basket, woven strips of the brown ash tree, or the reed, a shindy, its earthy scent carried across the Atlantic from Somalia to weave again a new carrying, home held in the knowledge of hands teaching new hands. For in this vessel we carry cinders, ashes, which are the spent remains of yesterday's fire, but also the memory of its warmth. And in this bucket are the words of our ancestors, the stories our ancestors told in their languages, which maybe we never learned to speak, though we carry the recollection in this bucket, along with the harms done to or by them, carry it inside the silences we did learn, carry it with dirt and rocks, with manure, wood chips, sawdust, rivets, and welding rods, with a ship's manifest or a changed name, a broken treaty, mulch or wilting root-ripped weeds, carry with grain for the chickens, with grain for the pigs, with salted herring to bait the lobster traps, carry with all the ghosts and bones of our history, with the maps history has made of our ghosts and our bones. Carry in this bucket with the sweet scent of frost-burned apples, with the clear, cold sugar the maple trees bleed in the spring, with the water of the Penobscot, the St. John, the Kennebec, the Androscoggin, with peonies cut and glistening nectar, their heavy blossoms both home and food for the ants. Carry, along with some root vegetable we have dug fresh from the earth, planted and tended with our own two hands, potatoes or carrots perhaps, or the foraged green pungency of ramps or fiddleheads, some gift we are carrying now up this steep hill or along the street as a promise to our children or their children, carrying to eat or to store through another winter, carrying separately, each of us, but all at the same time, carrying still across each new day until our carrying becomes a chorus, a linking, a lifting, a gathering, this offering we share with those we love, our arms outstretched to one another as we say, "Here, I have brought you a taste of our home." Thank you.
And that is Maine's Poet Laureate Julia Bousma. She is a poet, a farmer, and also the library director in Kingsfield. We're expecting some more performances coming up in just a bit.
It's my pleasure to welcome PASA 2, Multinational Girls Chorus, to perform for the Joint Convention.
Robbie, this is going to be special, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the Pacintu Multinational Girls Choir. This is made up of a chorus specifically of young immigrant women from more than a dozen countries from around the world. They have performed from all over the U.S., National Cathedral, even the United Nations. So I'm sure this is going to be, just really powerful.
And led by Con Fulham there, you see him in the foreground with his guitar. This group really has made a name for itself and brought a smile to faces all over.
Mr. Weatherman,
And we had the audience clapping there, joining in with the Pacintu Multinational Girls Choir. Right there, you could clearly see Governor-elect Mills. You saw Senate President Jackson there also clapping along with that. And you saw the choir and their founder, Con Fulham, right there. Coming up, we've still got a few more performances. We're expecting more poetry from
Richard Blanco.
Yes, Richard Blanco.
Richard Blanco, 5th presidential inaugural poet and Maine resident, to read original work created for inauguration of the Joint Convention.
Richard Blanco grew up in Miami but has lived in Bethel for a long time. He is an engineer by training and also, of course, read the inaugural poet for Barack Obama. Incredibly popular presence in Maine, beloved poet laureate.
Good evening, everyone. It's a sincere pleasure and privilege to be with all of you tonight to celebrate Governor Mills 2.0. As many of you know, Governor Mills loves poetry and is an amazing poet in her own right, which made writing this poem 20 times more terrifying than writing the poem for Obama's 2013 inauguration. But on the other hand, he made me write 3 poems. Governor Mills only made me write 1, so we'll see. And sincerely, I've had the pleasure of sharing Governor Mills' love for poetry, but also her love for the immense beauty of our state. And how I've been on hikes with her. I can't keep up with her. Like, as you can tell from the LL Bean boots, I mean, pointing out trees and birds, and it's made me fall in love with Maine in a whole other way. And so in some ways, this poem is inspired by her love for the state's beauty as well as mine, and the fact that I think she governs in some ways, knowing that power of nature that we all feel for this state and all of us who live here. What governs us? The Congress of our mountains in which I trust, upholding eons of nature's unwritten laws enacted across my eyes every dawn. The counsel of our clouds that advise me on how to reshape myself, yet remain myself. The committees of our valleys, wildflowers, whose colors advise my sometimes colorless life. I never tire of listening to the incessant debate of our waves crashing against the granite rebuttal of our coast. Neither ever wins. Neither needs to, teaching me what is the balance of power. The presidential stance of our pine trees that keep me loyal to our statutes of beauty, reaching for the sky. The seagulls and hawks I caucus with, who show me how to harness the shifting winds so that I can see everything, even through the fog of our hardest times. At times, I think of myself afloat, alone, like our lone islands, yet complete and self-reliant. Every dusk, our sovereign sun bestows across my heart its golden medal, honoring the light that beats through us all. At night, I stare at the blank page of our moon, reminding me to never stop signing my dreams' petitions for a more just world. I cast my vote among the twinkling senate of our stars that assembled to pass unto us our need to love as one. We, the native who thrived here long before the foreign who sailed here. We, from away and those that have yet to arrive. We, our past, our present, our future. We, meaning all of us, who understand that what governs us is more than just ourselves.
Blanco from Bethel right there performing an original work for the inauguration and doing a little dance as well on stage.
Richard Blanco of Bethel, the inauguration presided by Senate
Now my
President
pleasure
Troy
to welcome
Jackson.
Dave Mallett to perform for the Joint Convention.
I'd like to welcome Luke and Will, the Mallett brothers. It's a pleasure to be here. Sometimes you just don't feel like trying. Too many politicians lying. Too many hungry babies crying. Too many random bullets flying. Too much time spent in a struggle. Too many little kids in trouble. Too many cities gone to rubble. Too many people talking double. This can't be our destination. This could be a better nation. Time to set the big horse racing. Trains are leaving from the station. I got no reservation. Need a brand new generation. This could be a celebration now. 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 Situation's changing fast. Too much plastic, too much trash. Too many smokestacks spewing ash. Too many people with no cash. Too much waste and not enough water. Too many abandoned sons and daughters. Too many lost and hopeless feelings. Too many low-down shady dealings. This can't be our destination. This could be a better nation. Time to set the big horse racing. Trains are leaving from the station. I got no reservation. Need a brand new generation. This could be a celebration now. Now.
Time I hear this roaring, pavement stealing iron ore, and people shouting, all so sure that this side is the right side more and more. Seeing abandoned stores and floors, weary, tired, and poor all the time, folks. They're buried in the wine because they're all so bored. It's becoming natural the way we need the things without a reason. Feed the greed, the weeds grow from the roots. We're all running from the truth. Choose to fight instead. Ourselves, leave loving hope on shelves, divided vengeance, free to sell us anything.
This can't be our destination. This could be a better nation. Time to set the big horse racing. Trains are leaving from the station. I got no reservation. Need a brand new generation. This could be a celebration now. Now. Too many people looking down, too many closed up factory towns, too much high priced propaganda, too much sadness in this land of dreams that once could all come true. Now it's down to me and you. Tell me what you're gonna do. Tell me what you're gonna do now. This can't be our destination. This will be a better nation. Time to set the big horse racing. Trains are leaving from the station. I got no reservation. Brand new generation. This could be celebration. This could be celebration. This could be celebration. This could be celebration. This could be celebration now. Now.
Just lovely. Dave Mallett, singer-songwriter Dave Mallett, performing with his sons, Luke and Will, otherwise known as the Mallett Brothers. We are here at the inauguration of Governor-elect Janet Mills at the Augusta Civic Center. Senate President Troy Jackson presiding, and that is scheduled at least to be the final performance before the actual oath. And if our notes are right, Janet Mills' grandchildren will come back on stage and hold the Bible.
Please step forward.
Forgot about this part.
Yeah.
Governor Mills and Troy Jackson go way back.
They do, and this is, of course, prescribed in the Constitution that the Senate President, Troy Jackson in this case, administers the oath to the governor.
Wow, different grandchildren than those who led us.
Governor.
Well,
The Pledge of Allegiance.
Governor, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Janet Trafton Mills,
Do swear
do swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state,
that I will support the Constitution of this state and the United States, or the United States. I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state. Yes.
we got to get this right.
All right. I'm with you.
So long as I shall continue a citizen thereof.
So long as I shall continue a citizen thereof.
So help me God.
So help me God.
I state your name.
I, Janet Trafton Mills,
Do swear
do swear
that I will faithfully discharge,
that I will faithfully discharge,
to the best of my abilities,
to the best of my abilities,
the duties incumbent on me as governor of the great state of Maine,
the duties incumbent on me as governor of the great state of Maine,
according to the Constitution
according to the Constitution
and the laws of this state.
and the laws of the state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And Governor Janet Mills starts her second term officially.
Yep, you don't have to call her governor-elect any longer, Jen.
And we're getting a standing ovation here in the Civic Center. People standing up across several different rows.
I think that's great.
All right.
4 years ago, history that Janet Mills elected the first female governor of the state of Maine, now first woman to be reelected.
That's correct.
As governor of the state of Maine.
That's right.
In a race that was expected to be close, Steve, but really was not in the end.
It was not. She defeated former Republican Governor Paul LePage by more than 13 percentage points, which I don't think anybody saw coming, including Governor Mills. She felt pretty good heading into Election Day, but not that good.
The Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, will come forward and read the proclamation.
It is my solemn duty, my distinct privilege, one of the great honors of my life, to present this proclamation, the words of the last 200 years, and governors sworn in over the last 200 years, given under my hand this 4th day of January in the year 2023 to the Joint Convention. The votes given on the 8th day of November last in the cities, towns, and plantations of the state of Maine for governor, the returns of which have been made to the office of Secretary of State, having been examined and counted by the legislature, which has declared that a plurality thereof was given to Janet Trafton Mills, that she is duly elected, and that she, having in the presence of the two branches of the legislature in convention assembled, taken and subscribed the oaths required by the Constitution to qualify her to discharge the duties of that office. I therefore declare and make known to all persons who are in the exercise of any public trust in this state, as well as all good citizens thereof, that Janet Trafton Mills is Governor and Commander-in-Chief of the state of Maine. and that due obedience should be rendered to all her acts and commands as such. God save the great state of Maine.
Secretary of State Jenna Bellows issuing a proclamation declaring Janet Mills governor of the state of Maine. Everybody got a giggle out of the due obedience part of that.
It's my privilege and honor to present the Honorable Governor of the great state of Maine, Janet Crafton Mills.
It's kind of interesting, Jen, to watch Senate President Troy Jackson and Governor Mills interact on the stage because they've had disagreements in the past. Troy Jackson would be the first person to admit that. Very bitter disagreements on policy at times. But I think that that's actually fostered a bit of a friendship. You can kind of see it just the way they interact with one another.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, please be seated. My goodness. Mr. President, Madam Secretary of State, Madam Speaker, Madam Chief Justice. I like the way this is going. It is, and members of the 131st Maine Legislature, members of the Cabinet, Rabbi Ash, Bishop Brown, and distinguished guests, it is a profound honor and a privilege to take the oath prescribed by the Constitution and to assume again the mantle of governor of the great state of Maine. I am deeply humbled and by the trust the people of Maine have placed in me. President John F. Kennedy once said, "If more politicians knew poetry and more poets knew politics, I'm convinced the world would be a little better place in which to live." I agree, and I want to thank especially our own poet laureate, Julia Bousma, and Bethel resident and presidential inaugural poet, Richard Blanco, and Maine's poet-musician, Dave Mallett, for their very inspiring words. Thank you to the Franklin County Fiddlers and the Sockalexis Singers and the Pacintu Choir, Pacintu Multinational Girls Choir, and including my young friends Shai and Natasha, who graced the same stage with their presence 4 years ago. Welcome back. You're more beautiful than ever. I also want to draw your attention to the empty chair in the military section of the audience and to honor and recognize all Maine service members who have lost their lives in service to their country. I would not be standing here today if it were not for my family as well, my brothers Peter, Paul, and David, my sister Dora, niece and nephew, my 5 daughters and 5 wonderful grandchildren, and my husband Stan, gone 8 years now, who rose every morning happily proclaiming, "The best is yet to come." Traversing this state many times over many months, I have learned more about the character of our people and the worth of our communities, what we give and what we take and what we offer to each other. I've toured clinics and hospitals, large and small, schools, warehouses, stores, diners, and boathouses, log yards, libraries, and factories, houses of worship of all faiths. And I can report from the Can-Am at America's First Mile to Maine's first town, the 370-year-old Kittery, from Friar's Brew Pub in Bucksport to Bang's Mussels in Portland, from Robbins Lumber in Searsmont to Louisiana Pacific in Holton, from Geiger Brothers in Lewiston to New Balance, Sappi, and Maine Grains in Somerset County, from the lakes and slopes of western Maine to the University of New England, Athena Health, Jackson and Bigelow Labs, the Furlan Center in Orono, and the Rue Institute in Portland. Great things are happening in the state of Maine. And I can report as well that across this state, this one Maine, hope is very much alive. Over the last years, you know, there was something that caught our attention, especially during the pandemic. These large, luminous, neon-like signs that began popping up in cities across Maine. Hopeful, they read in colorful, cursive script. These signs became a symbol not just of survival, but of health, renewal, new life. The sign's creator, Charlie Hewitt, said, quote, "To be hopeful is not a gift, it is a challenge. It's a challenge. To be hopeful requires opening your eyes, it requires making a decision, being part of something," unquote. Maine people know and embrace this. Indeed, we experienced it these last few years. And tonight, like Charlie Hewitt's Art Deco signs, a flashback to previous decades, at this time, the James Webb Telescope is taking us back through time and into the bowels of celestial history like some magical mystery tour of the universe, drawing us both inward and outward through space and time and unlocking mysteries of the past and foreshadowings of the future. So I can't help but wonder if our forebears a century ago had a Webb telescope to view the world down through time, what might they think of where we are today? Would they ever have imagined that the log drives would come to an end, that the narrow gauge railway would turn into a quiet footpath, that our granite quarries would be rendered obsolete by the invention of concrete? Could they have foreseen cell phones and flat-screen TVs and computers of any size with words that are written and then disappear on a virtual page as though they had never once become thought? Well, we do know one thing our forebears were thinking about. Exactly 100 years ago, Dora Bradbury Pinkham of Fort Kent, Maine, became the first woman to serve in this legislature. It was big news. Arthur G. Staples of the Lewiston Evening Journal wrote about it. He said, quote, "It may happen that in after years, perhaps 2023, he said, some woman governor of Maine and some legislature largely composed of women may desire to know how the first woman legislator carried herself." And he continued, "So," he said, "in the year 2023, 100 years hence, Dora Pinkham is thus presented to you, and Maine is ready for her sisters." End quote. Well, Arthur Staples, here we are. I hope Dora Pinkham would be pleased to know that today, half of our congressional delegation are women, that a black woman from Portland is our Speaker of the House. And that a woman whose own roots lie deep in Pinkham's beloved county has now taken the oath for the second time to serve as governor of the state. Today, a century after Dora Pinkham took the oath, our rivers no longer carry logs to sawmills. Our food comes in slick packages from around the globe. And we meet with distant friends and coworkers on a screen the size of a writing pad. But what about our descendants, those generations yet to come? What might the telescope of the future reveal to them about who we are now and where we are going? Will it be good? Will they be proud of us? Will the people of the future see how we fought disease, homelessness, crippling opioid use, and a fear of those who are different from us? Will they appreciate that for their sake and ours, we began to rid our farms and waters of the forever chemicals known as PFAS? Will they see how we promoted health and education, celebrated arts and literature, preserved our precious right to vote, and conducted free and fair elections? Will they see how we adapted and evolved during turbulent times, adjusted to technology and innovation, how we explored new sources of energy, electricity, new modes of communication and travel? I hope so. But perhaps they'll ask other questions, probing questions as well, like, what was that daylight savings thing all about? Who the heck was Elon Musk, and what on earth was Twitter? And what were all those tall gray structures that held something called an office? Maybe they'll also ask, what took them so long to shelter the unhoused? Why did it take years for them to build a house when we can 3D print a single home in an hour? Why, they may ask, did they wrap everything in packaging, material they could have reused, and why did they dump waste in the ocean and bury it in the earth? What were all those parking lots and those tarred roads crisscrossing the countryside, they will ask, and the gases emitted from structures and vehicles that clogged the air and warmed the planet and melted the ancient glaciers? Why, they will ask, did the scourge of a drug epidemic rob them of so many precious lives? Why didn't they have safe and loving places to care for all their children? Why did they pay so much every time they went to a doctor or a pharmacist? These questions, my friends, may be asked in the future, but the answers will be shaped by our actions in the coming months and years. Four years ago, I stood before you and promised to work for a healthier, more vibrant, more welcoming state. Who could have known 1,463 days ago that this state, this nation, and countries across the globe would face a deadly pandemic reminiscent of the Spanish flu from 100 years ago? One that would threaten the safety of every community, business, family, and person. One that would challenge us to reinvent how we learn, work, play, travel, and communicate safely. A phenomenon that would test the very core of our character. It was during that time that I heard from thousands of you. Emails, cards, letters, notes from people sharing their thoughts and their fears, including ones from children, like 10-year-old Savannah, who wrote, quote, "Dear Governor Mills, I hope this COVID doesn't affect our hearts being isolated from one another," end quote. Well, Savannah, we learned that neither a worldwide pandemic nor any other thing will ever isolate our hearts from one another. For we are a caring people. We in Maine are family. And we have found such strength within ourselves we didn't know we had, even as Dave Mallet puts it, with our backs against the wall. And we have once now come through that horrific time better than nearly every other state in the nation. With the good people of this cabinet, with the brilliant leadership of Commissioner Lambrou and CDC Director Nirav Shah, and others. We answered the call. Now, experts nationally say that both our public health response and our economic recovery have been among the best in the country. Four years ago, I committed my new administration to taking us into the future, to welcoming new people to our state and welcoming back those who have left. And so I'm pleased to report, after the decades-long exodus of young people from our state, Maine now boasts the 7th highest in-migration rate in the country. We're welcoming new people every day, and we continue to listen to the people of Maine. You said you wanted a government that paid teachers better, that funded public schools, schools where children would learn on full stomachs, and a government that made the dream of higher education attainable for more people. And so, we fully funded the state's share of public education for the first time in history. We provided universal free meals in the public schools. We provided free community college to recent high school grads. And we enacted one of the most generous student loan forgiveness programs in the country. You said you wanted health insurance for more people, so we expanded MaineCare to more than 100,000 people, as the voters told us to do. And we've reduced the uninsured rate by more than any state in the country. And we listened to small businesses drowning in health insurance costs, and we lowered their premiums for the first time in decades. You asked us to pay attention to what UN scientists have called a red code for humanity, and the violent storms across the nation damaging homes and farms and towns and fisheries and wildlife and everything our country holds dear. So, with renewable energy, weatherization, efficiency, alternative heating sources, and a focus on resiliency, we have put Maine on a path towards carbon neutrality, with a plan to protect our precious farms, shorelands, and towns from the ravages of climate change. You asked us to expand broadband, recognizing that it is the communications highway of the future and that high-speed internet is as necessary to everything we do as water is to life. So we created the Maine Connectivity Authority, and we've connected more than 48,000 households to the internet, and I've pledged that by the end of 2024, every person in Maine who wants a good internet connection will have one. You asked us to begin to repair the divisions between the state and tribal nations. And so we enacted the highest water quality standards in the nation for rivers with sustenance fishing. We expanded tribal court prosecution of domestic violence, and we negotiated major new revenue sources for the tribes. You urged us to protect reproductive health care against the threat, now real, that the Supreme Court would overturn Roe v. Wade, and we did so. We passed laws that discouraged protesters from blocking clinics, that required public and private insurance coverage for abortion services, and made those services available to women in rural as well as urban areas of the state. You asked us then to preserve some of the special places of our state. And so, without borrowing, we reinvigorated the Land for Maine's Future program and acquired thousands of acres of working waterfront farmland and wildlife habitat for generations to enjoy in trust 100 years hence. You asked us to fight against federal rulings that threatened our iconic lobster industry, and we did, working with members of Congress, securing a regulatory pause, as well as funding for new research to protect both the right whale and the lobster industry. You asked us to manage our budgets prudently. And so state government has lived within its means, and we have built up the rainy day fund to a record high to shelter us from the impacts of inflation and possible recession. And we've continued to fix our highways and bridges, worn by time and use in Maine's changing seasons, without borrowing. Roads. But our job is far from finished. Today, a workforce shortage undermines our very ability to get things done, from teaching, policing, healthcare, farming, to selling and manufacturing and selling goods. Help wanted signs are everywhere. And so we are expanding workforce training in high schools and community colleges. We're making more child care available for working parents, and we're partnering with towns and businesses to find better housing for workers and shelter for the unhoused, and we're putting people to work. You're asking us to strengthen and diversify our economy, recognizing that we're too dependent on other states and nations and too vulnerable to the volatile winds of worldwide geopolitics. So we are investing in our fisheries, farms, and forest products to produce more at home, seizing on our spirit of independence and self-reliance while seeking new markets abroad. You're asking us to diversify our energy sources and loosen the stranglehold that fossil fuel companies have on the wallets of Maine families and businesses. So we are pursuing renewable sources of energy that will protect both our environment and your family's bottom line instead of big oil's profits. You're asking us to address the crisis in housing. So we issued the senior affordable housing bonds, first thing. Then we enacted the largest investment in housing in state history. We renewed the historic rehabilitation tax credit, and we have funded more than 1,500 new residential units and adding hundreds more in the years to come. We're working every day with cities and towns and developers to stand up emergency shelters and workforce housing in a way that fits the needs of every town. You're asking us to do our best to stop the ravages of opioid addiction and the waste of human life and human aspirations from drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine. And so we are in earnest providing treatment beds and recovery and prevention measures and distributing naloxone everywhere to save thousands of lives. And we will make sure that every school and every community has an effective prevention program to stop the scourge of addiction before it begins. You're asking us to make sure that every child in Maine is safe, acknowledging that these same drugs that are killing adults are endangering children too. So we reactivated the Children's Cabinet, long dormant. We put more child protection workers on the street, and we're adding resources for foster families in every effort that we can to keep our children safe. But that work is never over. We cannot and shall not rest until we eradicate the scourge of child abuse and neglect, drug overdose, and domestic violence, acts and injuries and deaths that tear at the very fabric of our society. You're asking us as well to recognize that children's emotional health also suffered during the pandemic, and that hospital emergency rooms and jails are not the right places to treat someone in a mental health crisis. So we have opened Maine's first comprehensive crisis receiving center. We're investing in residential care and community-based treatment. We're training up more professionals and expanding mental health crisis services statewide. Ladies and gentlemen, over the next 4 years, it will be our challenge to address these issues head-on, to continue the march of progress we began 4 years ago, and to be prepared for the challenges not yet known to us. And in doing so, we envision a Maine as a place where quality health care is unquestioned, where good education from pre-K through graduate school is available and affordable, where good paying jobs are offered in every corner of the state, where children are safe and secure in their homes, and where anyone can go online from any place in Maine to shop, attend a class, conduct business, sell something, get medical help, or simply send a message to a friend. These are our goals, hopeful but real. That hope is built of the hardiness of a people who endure long winters and muddy springs and hot summers and windy falls, people who endure and survive and thrive above it all. Hope is not an easy thing. It's not mere wishful thinking. It's not just trying to do what we did yesterday in the same old way. Hope is disruptive. It is, after all, a four-letter word. It challenges and changes the way we do things, and it calls on us to advance and adapt while preserving everything we are as a people and all the values we hold dear. And more than ever before, because of everything we have been through and because of everything we are, hope resides here in Maine. Hope. Hope is manifest in the actions you took this very day, actions inspired perhaps by one of humanity's great spiritual guides who said 2,000 years ago, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in, naked and you clothed me." For your actions today in housing, heating, and helping those in need, the people of Maine are deeply grateful. You, the Maine legislature, have provided hope. Hope is about finding new and innovative ways to solve problems, using the ingenuity and courage we rediscovered within ourselves these last few years. And I see hope all across the state today. There's hope in the work of University of Maine students devising new uses for wood and ways to harness the power of the raw winds of the Atlantic and methods to build homes with bio-based materials from a giant printer. There is hope in the aspirations of inventors and innovators at the Rue Institute, using artificial intelligence and data analytics to solve complex problems. Hope in cities like Waterville, Biddeford, and Westbrook, who are evolving from their industrial past, reinventing their downtowns and attracting new families and new businesses every day. Hope in the faces of women shopkeepers in Lewiston and Portland, selling fabrics, foods, and spices from other countries. These industrious mothers of soccer champions, daughters of another continent. Hope in the vision of enterprising artists, poets, musicians, architects, writers, and makers of crafts in every corner of this state. Hope in the far reaches of the county and down east and in the shadows of our western mountains where farmers, foresters, fishermen, hunters, storekeepers, and tourists coexist. And there is hope in the eyes, hope as well, in the eyes of those who have forded raging rivers, thick forests, steep mountains, and rough seas to seek refuge here in our country, refuge and work in our country and in our state. There is hope for the future, just as it was hope that saw us through troubled times in the past. The charge, the responsibility we take up today is to choose action over acquiescence and apathy, to make decisions grounded in experience with an eye to the future, and always to be part of something larger than ourselves. And so on this solemn occasion, let us recommit to working together and acknowledging that health care is a human right and we will fight to preserve it. That education is essential and we will provide it. That climate change is real and we will combat it. And that a decent home is essential and we will build it. And when the people of the future look back on us through their own James Webb telescope, they will see that we worked together during difficult times and good, that we settled our differences with civility, common sense, and compassion. That we took care of one another, that we protected the air, water, and land around us and built a state that survived and thrived long into the future. And perhaps, too, they will see some things I believe will never change. The way the surf of the mighty Atlantic pounds the granite shores of our state. The way Katahdin rises up in all its majesty in the western sky. The way the Basilica in Lewiston inspires the people of the mighty Androscoggin. The way so many institutions of higher learning enrich and grace our towns and cities across the state. And the way Moxie tickles the throat as it goes down. And the way the wild blueberry finds a place in every tasty meal. 100 years from now, people not yet born will turn a telescope back in time and find in the Maine of the 2020s, a place where government did everything it could to save the lives and livelihoods of its people, took nothing for granted, but invested wisely to make Maine a clean, healthy, and welcoming place where success is attainable. And they will remember one sign, one word, that guided our path, our actions, and our dreams. Hopeful. It is the highest privilege of my life to serve as your governor during hard times and good, stormy seas and calmer waters as we weather the best and the worst of times together, tackling extraordinary problems through extraordinary times alongside you, the extraordinary people of Maine. It is an honor to lead a people where everything good is possible and where we believe always deep in our hearts the best is yet to come. Thank you.
A poetic inaugural address by Governor Janet Mills. built around themes of history and hope, looking back 100 years and looking forward 100 years. Steve Missler, what struck you?
Well, I think what you just mentioned, first of all, I mean, I think she used the Webb telescope, which effectively allows us to see into the past, and uses that as a sort of rhetorical device in her speech to basically say, what will the people of the future think of us today when they see us? And, you know, it's basically an incentive to improve our present. And so that was the theme that she used, the device that she used. It was also part victory lap and a to-do list. Generally speaking, there was a lot of ticking off of accomplishments, but an acknowledgement that a lot more needs to be done.
Yeah.
Senate President Troy Jackson presiding again. I believe we'll now introduce the benediction.
Benediction will be offered by the Right Reverend Thomas James Brown, Bishop, Episcopal Diocese of Maine.
Holy God, whom we call by many names, we give you thanks for the people of Maine who come together today with the strongest sense of hope for the future that you desire to give us. Pour out the abundance of your blessing upon Janet, our governor. Sustain her and her family with joy and refreshment, which is essential to lead effectively. Fill her with gratitude for all the blessings of life, as well as for those disappointments which lead her to rely on you alone. Stir up in Janet deep trust in your grace for calling her to a second term, and strengthen her with an unending assurance that you have already given her everything she needs to fulfill the duties of this office. May those who oppose her bless her when she is fair. May those who come to Maine from other countries seeking refuge and promise call her merciful. May the poor and marginalized and those without a helper see in her a governor who creates opportunity. May all who tend the health of the land and water and air bless our governor by saying, she is our partner. May children continue to understand themselves to be her teachers. Above all, equip our governor and each of us in our 457 towns with regard for truth, humility to serve, openness to listen, and love for kindness. For these personify Dirigo, and therein rests our hope. And the people of God said, Amen.
And the Reverend Thomas Brown right there, the benediction. Senate President Troy Jackson once again at the lectern.
I get to leave now.
Soon.
Soon?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I did. Thank you.
Governor of the great state of Maine.
And Governor Janet Mills heads off the stage. Applause from Senate President Troy Jackson right there. She waves to musicians in the audience to applause, coming up that way. As she exits the auditorium, she says hello to officials right there with the new House Republican leader, Billy Bob Falkingham, right there.
Who served on her inaugural committee. I think it's safe to say that was a distinctively Maine inaugural celebration, Steve Missler.
It sure was. A lot of tributes to our natural resources, which is a very big concern and focus for the governor. And I think that she's using that in a frame of climate change as well.
Yeah. Steve, one of the big pieces of this that stood out to me as well, and I'd be curious to get your take on this, was how much Governor Mills really dwelled, and you mentioned the history of this, but really in the historic nature of her own role in this as well. She really dwelled on, she talked about herself as the first female governor. She talked about Rachel Talbot Ross as the first black Speaker of the House in a way that I don't think she even necessarily did 4 years ago. Did that strike you?
Yeah, it did. And in fact, she, like I think I mentioned this earlier, but the governor in her inauguration speech 4 years ago really just referenced the historic nature of her governorship or her election to become governor. And this time there was more of a sort of a pause and a recognition of not only her own ascension to the governorship, but also the other women before her, including the first black Speaker of the House, Rachel Talbot Ross, who's speaking right now. It was a little bit more of a look back than I had expected, but at the same time, I think that it was used as sort of a jumping off point to say, look, we've got a lot more work to do. We've accomplished a lot, but there's a lot more to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a remarkable quote from a newspaper, the Lewiston paper of 100 years ago, about the first legislator. I'm sure Janet Mills was thrilled to find that. Steve Missler, not many firm commitments during this speech, but there was one, and it had to do with high-speed internet.
Right, and that's been a commitment all along. I mean, the governor has really pursued broadband expansion in this state, signed a big bill last year to get that done, and I think that process is underway. It's going through some bumps. It's a little bit of a bumpy ride, but her goal is to make sure every person in this state has access to high-speed internet. A lot of Republicans and Democrats support that goal, so that's the one that they can all sort of agree on, and I think you'll find that a lot of what she laid out tonight was absent of a lot of detail of how to get there, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of that detail will be in her budget, in her State of the Budget address, which will be coming in about a month.
Yeah, see, was it surprising that we didn't hear any more concrete policy goals, or is it just that you're saying we're going to hear that pretty soon?
No, I expected this. So, this is usually not the time to put you all to sleep with a lot of policy details, right? It's more of a hopeful, aspirational type of message. And also a look back at the accomplishments that she had. So not a surprise that there wasn't details. Those are forthcoming, I would expect.
All right. Well, the 71st governor of the state of Maine and re-elected, first woman governor re-elected. Her inauguration comes to an end as people leave the Augusta Civic Center. We thank you for joining us on behalf of Robbie Feinberg, Steve Missler, the entire Maine Public crew. Thank you for joining us. Television viewers will catch the news hour in progress, and radio listeners will hear Maine Calling. Again, thank you for joining us for the inauguration of Governor Janet Mills.